Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Jose.
This week, Kevin Hart stars in his third number one film of the year. Clint Eastwood brings a Broadway favorite to the big screen, and in our home media moment, we have the latest version of a Charles Dickens classic. In our triple feature of older movies, we'll be reviewing Ruby Sparks and two films, coincidentally enough, by the same director, Peirre Jeunet. This month's Listener's Choice, City of Lost Children, and we happen to be up to Amelie in our Oscar A to Z. So we'll get to all of that. First, though, want to give Joe the mic for a second here. He went to the Philadelphia...
Check.
the Philadelphia Comic-Con this weekend. And, I don't know, just wanted to hear a little bit about that. A lot of big stars there.
Yeah, it was a really busy day. We got up early on the train. We got to the 8:20 train, went up there, spent pretty much the whole day there. And my goal this time was pretty much to hit up all the panels. And it was mostly entertainment, actually. I went to a Batman. They were celebrating his 75th anniversary, so a lot of old artists.
Oh, the original comic.
The original comics
Nice.
of the character. And so a lot of artists and writers are getting together to talk about that. That was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I missed some classics like Christopher Lloyd and Ralph Macchio, but hey, couldn't see everybody. I did get to see Nathan Fillion and Alan Tudyk. They were doing discussion about Firefly and kind of hyping up Dr. Harbaugh's Sing-Along Blog movie sequel.
Can't wait.
Something was pretty awesome. Just, having exchanges with the fans, mostly just jokes. Whoopi Goldberg was there talking about some it was funny. It wasn't that many big Star Trek questions. It was just mostly general stuff about her life, and because it was a really big deal for Whoopi Goldberg because it was sort of infamous. Because I actually told you guys this a little while ago. Something I found out. She was doing a Star Trek interview. She was talking to, I believe it was Leonard Nimoy, Shatner, Patrick Stewart, and Jonathan Frakes. And she was hosting this big special for all the captains, and it came up randomly, I've actually never been invited to any of these conventions, and they were just shocked. So
that blew my mind when you told me.
Philly Comic-Con is the first, big, geek pop culture convention that she's ever been invited to. So, really big deal, and everybody was really thankful about that. Personally, for me, it was pretty awesome. I got to go to John Carpenter's panel, and I got to meet him. Got awesome. his signature. Really cool guy.
Was that a Q&A as well?
It was a Q&A. Really interesting guy. I learned a lot of cool things about his development and his ups and downs of his career and his thoughts on the film industry now. And
yeah. He's got to be up there in age. How old is he now?
70s maybe? 60s, I think.
Okay.
In 60s. And I thought it was funny. He said something like, hey, just want to let you guys know when it comes to sequels, I have nothing to do with it. It's there's either good sequels or bad sequels. There's the good sequel. They say, hey, they ask me for their, advice, general opinions. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Try to do that. And then there's the bad ones, where I just get a paycheck and hope for it.
He's trying to get the word out that
just like the thing was not mine. And so it was pretty fun. There was one documentary I actually watched there. I thought it was pretty cool. I'll do a mini review quick.
Sure.
It was called Kung Fu Elliot, and it was basically about this group of people. They were doing their own, basically low budget independent kung fu movies. And it was funny, they kind of joked that they were making the best kung fu movie in Canada. This guy's goal was to basically be modeled after Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal, Schwarzenegger. He said Canada doesn't really have a big, Jean-Claude Van Damme, big action star. And so it was just really funny getting to see these really low-budget independent films being made. It was, I don't know, I guess if I had to grade it, I'd probably give it a B, because it was just so honest and heartfelt, and it was really kind of cool to see these guys put all this effort into these movies with basically a shoestring budget, virtually nothing. And, I mean, the actors were all really bad. They were really hamming it up. But that was kind of the style they were going for. And just seeing some of these guys and what they're doing was hilarious. And even some of the moments where they were more serious, like the one guy, he was one of the main actors, talking about how helping his friend make these movies actually helped him deal with his girlfriend's death. So there was actually some serious, compelling drama there.
Yeah, some weighty stuff.
It was a pretty well-made documentary about something that I didn't really expect. So overall, got the He-Man, 30th anniversary collection. Found a Spider-Man comic book. I think it's Spider-Man number 6. It might be a reprint. Not 100% sure, but it's in great condition. Definitely an older comic. Maybe it's the original. And my friend found it $1 bin.
That's so crazy.
I don't know how that happened, but it's pretty awesome.
So are there a lot of movies that they run there?
Well, I think it's a fairly new edition. They have done little, obviously, pre-showings for certain big movies. And,
I knew that.
Do trailers and discussions, obviously. But I guess this year they were starting what they call the Wizard World Film Festival, where you can actually go and put things ahead and put your own requests for things.
Oh, cool.
A lot of independent group stuff. I think it's funded by the Philadelphia like district of film or something.
Okay.
But I guess
they're the people I think that put on the Philadelphia Film Festival every fall.
They do normally, but
right.
I guess this one's a little more specific to the con. Like I guess if it's more homage to those sort of things. Right. I'm not 100% sure about it, but they were running a lot of interesting little movies there. I didn't get to see all of them, but that was one of the last ones they decided to run. So all in all, it was a very fun experience. I liked it. Probably of the 3 that I've gone to, I think it was my favorite one.
Awesome. And all 3 were in Philly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of something my friends and I do each year. We try to get up there, make it a day trip, and it's really fun.
That's so cool. Yeah, I imagine it's sort of like I've been to a lot of big festival concerts where it's like there's so much going on, you have to sort of decide, okay, I want to see this band over this band, and well, we're going to miss these guys, but...
Well, let me give you an example. Like it is so big, and some people only come down for one day. Mm-hmm. So even if you came up for a certain day, you'd miss somebody. Like for instance, there was no way we were going to be able to get into the Doctor Who Matt Smith thing because that was a paid event.
Sure.
It was just kind of like you had to pay head extra, and couldn't spend all that money just for Matt Smith.
Right.
And what was more frustrating, I had to pick between Whoopi Goldberg and Christopher Lloyd. They were at the same time, so I said, hey, you know what, Whoopi Goldberg, that seems bigger. And
yeah, she's a huge star.
So
Oscar
I'm like,
winner.
It was like, I don't know. So I think it was enjoyable, but yeah, there were just certain people I had to miss.
Yeah.
So, but I got to see some cool people.
And does everybody, you mentioned there's multiple days of it, the celebrities, are they there all of the days?
Most people are there 1 or 2 days. Like somebody like Lou Ferrigno, I think he lives in the Jersey area.
He might live,
he
in
comes
that area.
every year. Some people come for one day, like Stan Lee sometimes flies in.
Wow.
But other people, they might just come in for 1 day, 2 days. Like I think Matt Smith was in for like 2. It just depends. Like some people it's like Thursday, Friday. Some people do stay all weekend. Some of the writers do, but it really depends.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something to look forward to for next year for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll dress up again this time.
Yeah. And maybe look for this documentary coming out at some point on DVD or on demand. What was it called again?
Kung Fu Elliot. It was actually a pre-showing, and apparently it did win. It won some award. It won a couple awards up in Canada, actually.
Okay.
For I think it was like best martial arts film or something. It was pretty cool. So
maybe it'll even have a limited theatrical run then if it's winning awards.
They were talking it up. Like they said that they think it's going to be pretty big eventually because it was pretty awesome. So yeah, check out Kung Fu Elliot or check out some of that guy's films actually relating to his work. Because I mean, if you like that cheesy stuff, like, and I mean really,
which you do,
it was pretty awesome. If you like awesomely bad movies done purposely, I think you'll appreciate it.
Cool. All right, well, let's get into this week's new release slate, and we kick it off with, like I mentioned, the number 1 film of the weekend, Kevin Hart's Think Like a Man 2, just made that number 1 spot. It was in a pretty tight race with the second weekend of 22 Jump Street, but Joe's going to tell us about Think Like a Man 2.
Think Like a Man 2, with 2 O's. Like 2, right? Get it?
Yeah.
A comedy sequel to Think Like a Man, directed by Tim Story and starring Kevin Hart and all his friends. The characters are all friends who get together to celebrate the wedding of their good friend in Vegas as the antics continue to get more and more ridiculous on each side, divided between the men and the women. This is all wrapped around some dramatic subplots involving drama with an evil mother-in-law and business getting in the way of love. I don't think I need to have seen the original to appreciate this one. I didn't really like the characters that much in this movie. Most of them I found either to be annoying or just kind of underdeveloped. But then again, I didn't see the original, so maybe there's something to be spoken to there. The plot also didn't really suck me in until the final act when, surprisingly, they have to try and make a huge score gambling. It was here that I felt that some of the dramatic moments actually came together. The real question, though, is this movie funny? Sometimes. But mostly I felt that everything was out just too fast-paced that the jokes really didn't have time to process for me, and I give it a C-.
Okay. Yeah, I did see the first one. I think I gave it in the C+ range. But Think Like a Man 2, just, it goes wrong in so many ways. The main thing for me was, as you mentioned, it's just not that funny. Mm-hmm. Other than that, though, it's got so many main characters that we only get to know a small handful of them. And specifically, the white ones are extremely stereotypical and corny.
I thought that was kind of racist.
It
yes.
Sort of was.
To be honest.
It was. And just as a quick aside, I don't know if there's, like, some pool of, like, white actors, but, like, they appear in all of the African American movies. The one guy, Adam Brody, was in Baggage Claim. Wendy McLevin-Covey was in The Single Moms Club. I mean, a lot of the black actors are the same as well from, a lot of these movies. But yeah, I find that interesting, and their characters were just horribly written, very stereotypical.
I like Dennis Haysbert.
Well, yes, he was good. He's always good.
Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah, that was a surprise. See Kelsey Grammer for a little bit. But Kevin Hart's voiceovers are way too prevalent.
Oh, yeah.
He is about the only funny one of the bunch, but it's in his acting, not the incessant voiceovers.
Dude, the narration annoyed me so much.
Yes.
Like, hey, do I have to scream every 5 seconds? Do you get it? It's Vegas. It's exciting. Like, just calm down.
I noticed something about Kevin Hart.
So annoying.
And maybe Justin can back me up on this because we both watched this show recently. I just started watching it all over again. But Kevin Hart's entire persona is basically George Jefferson. He's this short, loud guy. He's too proud to ever admit that he's wrong. His voice goes up an octave when he's excited about something. It just, I hadn't noticed it before, but it's very George Jefferson-y. I don't know if that's on purpose as a, show that he watched when he was a kid, so he sort of pays tribute in his act, but...
Maybe.
Also, the Vegas thing is extremely played out. We did a top 5 Vegas movies last year. There's so many of them. The only thing I can say that this movie does better than its predecessor is that at least it's not a 2-hour advertisement for the Steve Harvey book of the same name, which was sort of littered all over the first one, Joe. It was bad. But anyway, I give Think Like a Man 2 a D+. Justin, you saw the first one or no?
I did.
Okay.
I did. This year, I find myself on a bit of a bell curve with leading man Kevin Hart. When we did our catch-up reviews at the start of Season 2 with Grudge Match, I found him as the traditional annoying jerk that I've always known him as. But then after Ride Along and eventually the reimagining of About Last Night, I started to kind of come around on him, until we came full circle with Think Like a Man 2. Granted, not much has changed about his character between this film and the last, and that's part of the problem. It's just more of the same. Although there is some occasional, if not few and far between, humor to be had in the Vegas setting, which reeks of product placement, just about every setback from the original is all the more present in the sequel, among the worst offenders being Jennifer Lewis continuing the unfunny mama's boy bit from the first film, and Gary Owen as Bennett, the gang's stereotypical white character who feels as if his only purpose is to be the target of arguably racist abuse from Hart. Though the best aspects of the film is when it truly doesn't seem to be pushing to be one genre or the other and just letting the comedy flow naturally, instead of when it gets increasingly chaotic later on, particularly during one completely useless 3-minute scene in the second act. And while the end does bring things together, it easily falls into melodramatic territory and teeters there until the credits roll. Think Like a Man 2 isn't the worst offering of the summer season, but it's just an unnecessary sequel to a film that never needed one, and I also, like Joe, give it a C-.
I'm surprised I gave it the worst.
Yeah.
Did you guys notice when the credits were rolling, Kevin Hart is the Kevin Hart. He's obviously the star of the movie. I don't know why they why they did that.
That kind of confused me because I was surprised to see him didn't he get last billing or something?
Yeah.
And I was thinking he is probably the closest thing to a main character.
Yeah. Which occasionally they'll do the and so and so at the end as but they're a supporting
normally,
big name.
He should be number 1. Yeah,
in this movie he's clearly
there are other main characters besides him, but
his voiceovers put it over.
It's
he
all,
gets way more screen time than anybody else.
Even if he didn't get top billing, he should have been towards the beginning because it's from his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's a big part of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I just felt like they could have cut some characters out or something. It was just too much.
Yeah, they could have. Each group of people, the bachelor party, the bachelorette party had 6 to 8 people in it. Mm-hmm. Only 2 or 3 of which we really get any sense of character from.
There was one of the girls I think barely ever spoke.
Mm-hmm.
I was I forgot about her sometimes. I didn't even know.
Yeah, because there's only so much dialogue to go around. And Joe, you hit on something. It's very fast and zippy, and you don't even
they just kept it was literally the scenes were moving so fast and the jokes were coming out so fast. I was was that supposed to be funny? By the time I've tried to think about it, there's another joke that I'm on.
Well, and I think that sort of covers up the non-jokes in the script. Mm-hmm. They're go at each other, real fast, and then we'll kind of flash back to each one of you in the directing, and it did not work as comedy for me.
Actually, speaking of fast, I remembered while watching it, your comment when we did the About Last Night review about how it gave you whiplash. There was one scene where they were in this club, and they must have done like 18 cuts between every single person talking. I started to get so disoriented.
Yeah, I don't... That to me just reeks of lazy directing, or maybe not lazy, but amateur directing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very basic, early mistake. Someone doesn't have a lot of experience. The whole cut back and forth thing constantly.
Yeah.
And what's worse is this is probably like the 7th movie Tim Story's done. He knows better at this point.
You'd think so. I mean, I felt like they were trying. I did feel like the director was trying to make it like energetic. Like I felt like there was energy, but it was very misplaced.
But I think the reason for that is because the script wasn't very good.
The script was bad. Yeah. I'll be honest.
But there's a difference between energy and just being downright frenetic, and this was the latter.
What about the music video in the middle?
I kind of liked that part. Pretty fun.
I know Justin didn't.
That was the useless.
Okay. Honestly, I didn't get it, but at least I was entertained by it.
I thought it was pretty stupid.
It was pretty stupid, but
that was a throw my hands up in the air moment.
There was some Justin favorite white rapping.
I like some white rapping
from Wendy McLevin-Covey.
Yeah, didn't need to see that.
No, it was useless, and
you could argue the whole party scene was though.
I guess that's true.
To be honest,
you could. All right, well, we'll see what happens with that one. Open at number 1, but usually movies like that are pretty front-loaded, so we'll see how quickly it goes down.
I doubt it'll have much staying power.
Yeah. I mean, if you liked the first one, maybe it's worth checking out. Justin, what did you think of the first one?
I gave it a C. I mean, there were aspects of it I liked. Like, the first, I'd say, 15, 20 minutes, I was on board with, and then just started heading more into mediocre cliche territory.
Yeah, I thought the first one was certainly funnier than this one, but the characters weren't developed any better. And, like I said, the whole, basically, hawking Steve Harvey's book, the whole movie...
got pretentious.
was a little much, but... Alright, well, next up is Jersey Boys, and this one was on my top 5 anticipated list. I'm almost done with those. Dumb and Dumber 2 is the last one
it was like,
that has to come out.
Hey, Dan, we're anticipating you. Come on.
Right. We did our top 5 anticipated for 2014 in December. This was... one of mine. It's the film version of the smash Broadway musical of the same name, revolving around the life and rise to fame of Frankie Valli and his band, the Four Seasons. Clint Eastwood directs, and John Lloyd Young from the original show reprises his role here as Valli. Joining him are Vincent Piazza as guitarist Tommy DeVito, Frankie's childhood friend and basically the ringleader of the group, Michael Lomenda as bassist Nick Massey, Eric Bergen as keyboardist, and songwriter Bob Gaudio, the youngest member of the group, who propels the Four Seasons to success with his lyrics, and Christopher Walken rounds out the main cast as Gyp DeCarlo, a business associate of Tommy's and supporter of the band from the beginning. Much like other period pieces directed by Eastwood like J. Edgar and The Changeling, the atmosphere of the subject matter permeates every scene down to the last detail. But that's one of the few strong things here about Eastwood's directing. The look of the movie is much more dull than it should be, and for a music biopic, it has one of the absolute worst sound mixes I have ever heard. Now, I saw this at a theater I had never been to before, and afterwards I texted Justin and said, hey, did you think there was something wrong with the sound? Because I wasn't sure if it was the speakers at the theater I was at, and he said, no, that's the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, in some scenes I couldn't understand half of the dialogue because the music was so overpowering. And all I kept thinking was, this is a movie that is going to be seen mainly by an older crowd. Mm-hmm. So if I can't understand the dialogue, what chance do they have? It's not the worst fate, since the best part of the movie is by far the music, but that alongside the incredible singing voices and acting chops of the four leads makes this movie much better than it probably should be. Walken doesn't even have really much to work with here. This is probably slightly generous, but for all its issues, the music is by far the driving force of the film, and the voices of the quartet are as authentic to the Four Seasons as Jamie Foxx is to Ray. So for that, I will leave Jersey Boys with a B-. Justin, what'd you think?
Musicals, much like most theatrical adaptations, try to find the balance between the original format, in this case the stage, and the transition to the silver screen. It's not an easy thing to pull off, and director Clint Eastwood's take on the hit musical Jersey Boys is a textbook example of becoming too theatrical for film. While I'm certain the fourth wall breaking narration was clever on stage, here it feels mostly unnecessary because none of the titular boys have anything particularly noteworthy to add. The music, as Dan put it, is great, and Eastwood still, for the most part, shows his talent behind the camera, even though I agree 100% with the sound issues. But most of this gets bogged down by the film's ridiculously long running time. This all leads up to a conclusion that, while fun, feels rather sloppily thrown together to make up for other things that should have been covered earlier. That said, the story of Jersey Boys is still a great one, but in this overlong musical biopic, it feels like far too much was put on the table, and sometimes in the wrong order. And I also give it a B-.
Joe, how did you feel about Jersey Boys?
I was kind of surprised Clint Eastwood directed it.
Yeah, that was sort of out of left field, right?
Well, let's put it this way. I just wish there'd been more mafia. It's like, business associates.
Yeah, there were some good business associates.
Like, those scenes were pretty
beginning,
good.
mainly.
Like, hey. Actually, I'm sorry. He was probably like one of the most useless mob bosses ever. Okay, you're going to get us out of a jam?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I'll make sure that you guys pay him on time.
They gave him nothing to work with,
I'm like,
Christopher Walken.
Like,
it was sad.
Like, what was the point of that? Anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of with you guys on this one. For Jersey Boys, I liked the backdrop of the movie, and I really did like the general story of seeing the inter-politics of the band and how it came together. I do find that the whole 1950s style music kind of entertaining, and I've always liked that feel. It felt generally authentic, though I guess it was a little drab, and it did seem more like they were trying to really focus more on the theater, so it kind of bogs it down a little bit. So I can see where you guys are coming with that. And I'm surprised that it was actually based on a musical, because it didn't feel like a musical to me.
Yeah, I didn't really get the whole stage-to-screen thing that Justin felt. I didn't think they were...
Set-wise, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And the whole breaking of the fourth wall thing. I kind of liked that at first, but I'll get to that in a minute. I think for me, the thing was, if this was based on a musical, I thought the soundtrack was there, and there was good music in it, but I didn't really feel like it was a musical. It didn't flow for me like that. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's a bit of a negative. I think that the film wasn't sure where the focus was on, because Frankie Valli seemed more like a backdrop character for the first two acts, and then it became more of a focus on him. Now, overall, the film honestly became better to me once it was more focused. As the story became more about Frankie Valli, I thought the overall story improved because everything held together. However, it still was kind of a cheesy story, but the general plot I did find enjoyable, and it led to a relatively satisfactory conclusion. I just wish that it had found its focus earlier on, and I also give it a B-.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I thought his family stuff was really kind of shoehorned in there.
Yeah.
It didn't get enough development.
I mean, I liked it when it was about him, but then, spoilers, when something happens, it's like, oh, it barely had time to register there. Mm-hmm. And I found these other characters like Tommy interesting, and... what was the name of the bassist? Nicky? Nicky, right?
Yeah, Nick was the bassist. Yeah, Nicky.
When Nick started to have a bigger part in the story, I felt like that was kind of shoehorned in because I liked his character, but he felt like he was barely there. And then all of a sudden, hey, my perspective.
In the last part, he sort of.
It's like, let me tell you about
speaking up.
How I felt about these things. I'm like, well,
yeah, you were a little late in the game for that.
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, the characters were interesting, but it's like they just were all bouncing around.
I loved Bob, the songwriter.
Oh, he was cool.
I loved him. I thought he, other than maybe Frankie, was really the best character. Yeah. Tommy was good, but at times he seemed like a bit of a caricature.
Mm.
Yeah.
He
was a Jersey boy.
I mean, I do like the actor. These are all relatively unknown actors.
Yeah, I don't think I recognize that.
Also, I have to say about the Joe Pesci part.
I didn't get that.
They were friends with Joe Pesci when he was young. So, okay, that's fine. But the actor playing him, Joey Russo, basically it was like he was doing an impression of the 50-year-old Joe Pesci in his movie roles.
Ooh,
yeah.
Didn't you think?
I thought
a little bit, yeah.
Just how he carried himself and what he said. And
less cursing.
Well, there was less cursing, yeah. But it seemed like he was just sort of doing an impression of the Joe Pesci we all know, so we would, get it.
I was confused by that, honestly.
Yeah.
I got it towards the end when they said, you hung out with Joe Pesci and he talked to me about these things. But when I first heard it originally, I'm like, Joe Pesci? Like, he would have been like 10 when this was going on. I just didn't understand that.
Yeah. About the length, Justin, I actually didn't think it was overly long, and I feel like maybe part of the reason was because when you do see a stage performance of something, usually it's 3+ hours.
Yeah.
So you figure this was, about 2:15. So I sort of can give it the benefit of the doubt for that. I wasn't bored with it. Were you a little bit bored?
I was going to say, I mean, yeah, I was feeling length after the end of the first act.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know about you, Joe. I think it might have been because I thought it was too stagey. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some things I did like about in that regard. I mean, some of the fourth wall breaking stuff I thought was okay. I think it varied from actor to actor. Some I thought we got an occasional kernel of.
I thought it worked the best with Tommy, because he's the one that sort of. I mean, he starts it in the beginning with the fourth wall.
I was fine with him doing it, but then everybody started doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the end, when they all four were doing it, it was
that scene ran on entirely.
It was a little much. Yeah, I admit that.
As far as the length goes, I felt it was long, but it didn't bother me too much. The thing that bugged me is I felt that if you were going to do like this epic biopic, you focus on it and you make it a little more serious, I guess, because for me it just felt like if this was Clint Eastwood, he knows how to make a big movie. I know he knows how to make a big movie. This movie felt like kind of a TV movie to me. It just seemed a little watered down.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I don't know.
It did seem a little watered down.
Like you said, like the stuff with his daughter and what happened, like you could have explored that more. That would have been some good drama. You could have delved more into the drinking and the backstory of the loan stuff. I mean,
right.
And I'm sorry, the most interesting part was the mafia subplot, which was barely there. So I'm like, I just felt like you could have had a much better movie. I mean, I know it was about the music, but I still felt like they didn't go further enough with any of these characters.
Or even, yeah, you're right. Even like Nicky the bassist, it's like he decides to leave the group. Oh, I got to focus on my family. Oh, you have a family?
I didn't know he had a family.
That would be nice to know earlier.
Yeah, we didn't hear anything about. Apparently, he has kids.
I mean, well, don't get me wrong.
That's fine.
That was a good dramatic scene.
We didn't know anything about
great character development.
Story.
But I barely knew he had a character to develop. He
Right.
develops it all in like that 5-minute sequence where he like flips out and then leaves.
Right.
It was like, oh, he was a person.
And I thought the time jumping towards the end there was really bizarre.
I got really confused about. Actually, that's right. The movie starts in 1951, and none of these actors look like they've changed. They're all acting the same. They're wearing the same clothes. And then all of a sudden, it's 1959. There was no sense of passing of time. 8 years goes by, and I'm like, whoa, that's that good point. I was really confused by that.
Well, and I thought too. In regards to that, Eastwood is the guy that did J. Edgar. He advanced Leonardo DiCaprio's age like 50 years throughout that movie. You couldn't give him a couple of wrinkles or something.
Frankie Valli's daughter looks like he's about 10 years older than she is or something. It was a little hard to believe.
I was going to say, it gets all the way to the 80s, and then magically in the 90s, they get old.
I thought the last scene, the makeup was decent for them.
Yeah, the final couple of scenes, I guess. But by that point, it was like the late 60s, early 70s, so I would hope they would have aged at some point in the movie, but
I don't know, like for about 20 years it didn't look like they aged at all.
Yeah, I was really expecting more from this. I mean,
so not quite the hype.
Well, I've never gotten to see the stage play, I guess is why I was so excited, because I love the Four Seasons and I'd always heard what a great stage show it is. So now I really want to see the stage show to see what I'm obviously missing from the movie.
Yeah, something was missing.
Yeah. All right, well, up next is Ida, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Anna, played by Agata Trzebuchowska, has been living her life in Poland as a sister of the church, awaiting the day to take her vows and become a nun, when she discovers a shocking secret about not only having Jewish roots, but also her real name, that is, being Ida Liebenstein. As Anna comes to terms with this realization from her Aunt Wanda, played by Agata Kuleza, the two set off to find the final resting place of her parents. If this premise seems a little bit like Philomena, that's because it kind of is. The difference here being that it essentially covers all the ground of the central mystery in about 40 minutes, and the rest is kind of tacked on. That's not to say that it stretches the boundaries of realism, but instead just doesn't feel needed when some of these don't have much to do with the central focus of the storyline. From a stylistic perspective, Ida has some truly impressive, albeit subtle imagery, truly blending intelligent use of lighting with the black and white format to make the images look both captivating and haunting. This is all done amidst the rarely seen in contemporary film traditional Academy aspect ratio, which for anyone who's not familiar, gives the footage a classic square look that this imagery encompasses seamlessly. Ida's not without some rather noticeable flaws, most of which could have been fixed had the film not been only 80 minutes long, but its technical and stylistic components almost make up for it, and I leave it with a B.
Yeah, Joe unfortunately didn't get to see this one, but when he asked me what it was about, as Justin mentioned Philomena, I told him it's kind of like a Philomena in reverse. This time it's a young nun about to take her vows in search of her own roots, including learning about her parents. Now that's of course a very simple interpretation of this movie, but I do feel it's apt since so much about Ida is simple, such as the decision to make it in black and white, and Justin mentioned the aspect ratio, and both, I think, work wonders for this movie. And also, it lacks a lot of dialogue, so the script is rather simple. It's more about emotions and the expressions. Ida also has a few more complex things going on, most notably Aunt Wanda's entire story. The romantic side story is necessary, but at just an 80-minute runtime, it's one of a few things that doesn't really get fleshed out enough. Director Paul Wachowski also made a very odd directing choice. Justin, I don't know if you noticed this, but nearly every scene is full of shots where everybody is in the bottom half of the frame. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it gives off the effect of like somebody's mom who doesn't know how to properly frame a picture with her camera. It was obviously a deliberate choice. I thought it was a little bit odd.
I mean, I felt that fit with the tone of the movie, but I will grant you that there were some times where that seemed a little strange.
Yeah, it seemed more well done during those kind of romantic scenes where she was with the boy, because then the captions were on a different part of the screen, and it was like, oh, a little bit different. But there's scenes where, like, Ida and her aunt are walking in the woods, and it's like the top half of the screen is nothing but like tall trees, and it just seemed like an odd choice. But anyway, aside from that, Ida has a very rich story to tell, but I'm just not sure she gets to tell all of it. And like you, Justin, I leave it with a B. I did think the aspect ratio was very interesting.
Yeah, that threw me off.
It's something that you don't see too much. The Great and Powerful Oz did it as sort of an homage to the original Wizard of Oz in its first 20 minutes or so, but. And actually, Grand Budapest Hotel did it a little bit as well. I think there were 3 different aspect ratios in that film where it was telling different parts of the story. But, yeah, I mean, Joe, I don't think anything you need to rush out and see. It may get some sort of attention for foreign language film.
You think?
Well, it's getting a lot of pretty
Good
positive
buzz, yeah.
reviews, I have to say. You know, unfortunately, Justin and I didn't love it as much as some of the other people out there, but... speaking of which, I didn't actually mention our top 5 in the top of the show, but since we are doing 2 separate movies by the same French director, Jean-Peirre Jeunet, in our triple feature, we're going to be looking at the top 5 French directors. So that'll be coming up shortly. First, though, is our home media moment to close out our new release portion of the show. And this week, that is Great Expectations. The latest Dickens adaptation is helmed by a guy we just talked about a few weeks ago, 4 Weddings and a Funeral's Mike Newell. It stars Warhorse's Jeremy Irvine as the orphan Pip, Helena Bonham Carter as Miss Havisham, the weird and wealthy spinster who lives at the end of the lane and helps Pip get a job as he comes of age, Holiday Granger as Miss Havisham's daughter, Estella, who Pip falls in love with, plus Ralph Fiennes and Robbie Coltrane as people important to Pip's growth during the film. Much like last year's Romeo and Juliet, there isn't anything that wrong with Great Expectations, but there's also no reason for it to exist. This particular version of the film wouldn't feel out of place as part of PBS's Masterpiece Theater, which is fine as TV movies go, of course, and a high school English teacher wouldn't do wrong to show this to their class after reading the novel, but other than that, it doesn't really do anything new with the story. Bonham Carter is the bright spot here, and her interpretation of one of the greatest literary characters of all time, in my opinion, is enough to see the movie, but only if you don't have much experience with the story. Otherwise, it's all already tread upon ground, and I give it a C+. Joe, what'd you think of Great Expectations?
Well, Great Expectations. I'll start off by saying that I love Dickens. Oliver Twist is one of my favorite novels. Nicholas Nickleby is a film adaptation that I've always enjoyed. And, of course, Christmas Carol has always had a minor impact on my life, as well as many others. Great story. This is one of the stories that I never really liked because I just never could get into it. Like, I tried to get into it, and I never enjoyed it that much. I never sucked me in. So, for me, I guess this was the first time I actually got through the whole thing. I did like the twisted love story. I mean, I think that it's a dark one. It has, some of the worst villains. In Dickens canon, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a pretty terrible person. This adaptation's a bit long, but I suppose it kind of has to be. The performances are good. The costumes were authentic, it seemed. The cinematography was good. And the music was very fitting. So I'd leave this with a B.
Okay. Not bad. Yeah, for somebody sort of new, not new completely, but somebody who's never made it through before.
Like, from what I remember, it seemed like it was pretty on point.
Yeah, it's certainly watchable.
Yeah, I thought it was fine.
Justin, what'd you think?
Well, this is going to be the Justin and Dan agree on everything episode, apparently.
Wow, is that right?
Actually, my review is much like yours, Dan. I actually compared this one to Romeo and Juliet in terms of we get a version like every decade or so. Not for any particular reason other than it's a classic. And, I mean, other than occasionally getting one that tries to do something different with the material, like setting it in the modern day, which ironically both literary texts have done.
Within about a year of each other, too.
Oddly enough, yeah.
Right? Great Expectations, I think, was 98.
Yeah.
Yep.
And but this one, it's pretty much no different. I mean, it doesn't really bring anything new. I thought the acting was decent. I thought the scenery was great. Some of the cinematography was good. It's just not that original. But the reason I'm giving this one a little bit of a one-up over Romeo and Juliet from last year, which I gave a C, comes from the fact that Great Expectations, I don't think, is as well-known a story as Romeo and Juliet, which we've seen beaten over to death throughout, I want to say, most people's lives. Yeah. So for this one, I leave Great Expectations also with a C+.
I'm the same. I gave Romeo and Juliet, I think, a C- or a C. We reviewed it on the show because I actually got to see it when it was in theaters, but it was somewhere in that range. This is certainly a shade above that, and maybe it is because it's a less-known property. But what I thought was interesting about it is if they had maybe at least put like a popular newcomer actor in the role of Pip, at least it would open up the story to like maybe a newer audience. Sort of like, I mean, obviously Baz Luhrmann did many different things with Romeo and Juliet, but putting Leo and Claire Danes certainly got the kids interested in that movie. And I feel like the fan base for people like Ralph Fiennes and Robbie Coltrane have already seen this movie 3 or 4 times throughout their lifetimes. Like I would have liked to have seen maybe a hot, new face. Like Romeo and Juliet, they tried to do that a little bit. Haley Steinfeld's coming off an Oscar nomination and that kind of thing.
That's true. I didn't think of it that way.
But I think that would have made it maybe pop a little bit more. Introduce it to a newer audience.
I thought it looked great.
Yeah.
I thought the acting was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything was solid enough about it.
I feel like it was kind of like they were just going through the motions.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought. I didn't think Ralph Fiennes was all that great in it, to be honest.
He was okay.
Not particularly.
Yeah, he was all right. All right, well, enough said about that. Let's move into our top 5, and as we just mentioned, that is going to be the top 5 French directors. There may be some butchering of names here, so we'll do the best we can with those, and you'll forgive us if we're not completely accurate with our French. Well, Justin, this is one that you came up with, so why don't we start with you and let us hear 5 through 2 on your list.
Okay. To start off, an honorable mention, Georges Méliès, who was the subject of Hugo. The main reason I don't feel comfortable with putting him on this list, even though I think he's completely deserving, is the bulk of his films are anywhere between like 3 minutes and 15 minutes long. So, I mean, very influential director, very talented director, so I leave him as my honorable mention. My number 5, Jean-Luc Godard. With this guy, I think his cultural impact is very evident in both films, French and very much American. For anyone who's not familiar with Godard, he was one of the people who started the technique style of the French New Wave, which focuses a lot on long tracking shots, rapid cuts, and so on. I've only seen 2 of his movies, but it's really evident how much he's had an impact on other directors. Alphaville, which, I mean, really, for being such a low-budget sci-fi film, you can see its impact in so many movies. Blade Runner, The Terminator, with the tracking and the way cars move, and I think he still holds up today. There are other issues I have with him, but it's hard to deny that this guy was influential. My number 4 is a bit more of a recent gentleman. That is Jaume Collet-Serra. For anyone who's not familiar with him, he did Unknown and this year's Nonstop. I think he is a great director of taking interesting ideas that you wouldn't necessarily think of and making them really suspenseful and developing them over the course of the film without making it drag or making it falter. And he's obviously got a great grasp on Liam Neeson. He's got another one coming out in 2015. I'm really curious to see how he's going to handle it.
I like both of those movies. I don't know if I had him on my initial list or if I just sort of glossed over him, but that's a good choice. Both of those movies are very good.
Yeah.
My number 3 is a director whose work we're going to be talking about later, and that is Peirre Jeunet. Honestly, probably wouldn't be on this list had we not watched so many of his movies this week, but I really do like his style. I really like how he implements color. I really like how he paints this overall atmosphere that really draws you in and really makes you want to look at it as a whole. I have other issues with him, but I'll save the rest of that for the actual reviews themselves. And my number 2, one that has been a director that's been very dear to my heart since I was a child, and that is Sylvain Chomet. For anyone who's not familiar with this gentleman, he directed The Triplets of Belleville, which I would probably consider my first legit art movie. It was the first movie I actually saw at the art house theater that we frequently review movies from for the show.
Yeah, we saw Ida there.
Ida, yep. Really interesting guy. He has this very strange but very unique style that both draws you in with its quirkiness, but also adds a lot of biting satire that I really enjoy. He's only made a handful of movies, but all of them that I've seen anyways, really have this inviting atmosphere that I always want to come back for more. And ironically enough, this season he was chosen to animate a couch gag for The Simpsons.
Oh, wow. Then he's my number 1.
Spoilers, man.
No, I have not seen Triplets of Belleville. I don't think I've seen any of his movies, actually.
The Illusionists, 2010.
I know, I didn't see it.
Oh, wow.
That was the animated best animated nominee. All right, well, I guess I'll go. I'll start with an honorable mention as well, and that is going to be Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Just having been introduced to his work over the last 4 or 5 days, I feel it might be a little bit early to put him in a top 5, but obviously we'll be talking about his work shortly, so won't tip my hat too much to that. My number 5 is Denis Villeneuve. He directed Prisoners, and earlier this year he directed Enemy, which I have to say, Joe, you'll be pleased to hear this, I really keep coming back in thought to that film. I would like to see it again when it comes out on DVD. Ooh. I mean, within the week I saw it, I think we pushed it off from the one show to the next show, so I had like a week and a half between when I saw it and when we talked about it. I had already bumped my grade up a little bit from there, and I feel like it could continue to go higher because it really is a thinker and one that you need to spend time with. Prisoners, of course, I loved right out of the gate, so easy number 5 there. My number 4 is Louis Leterrier, and he directed the 2008 version of The Hulk, and also Now You See Me from last year. I didn't see these, but he also directed both of the Transporter films, which people seem to enjoy.
First one's good.
But I don't know, both of the movies I've seen of his, I really, really liked his style. Obviously, there's some good Hulk movies and there's some not so good Hulk movies. I thought the 2008 one was certainly one of the better ones.
I'd agree.
And I really enjoyed Now You See Me. For its faults, I didn't love it. I think I gave it a B or a B minus, but the direction in that film was really crisp, I thought. So that's my number 4. My number 3 we just talked about on last week's show, and that's Dean DeBlois, who co-directed the first How to Train Your Dragon and directed the second one all by himself. The best thing about the How to Train Your Dragon movies is the animation and the direction. the flying scenes and all of that comes together from DeBlois. So had to give him some love there. And my number 2 is Michel Gondry. I've only seen 2 of his movies. He hasn't directed all that many, but I've seen Be Kind, Rewind, which I love. And The Green Hornet, which obviously had its problems. I thought it was all right for the direction. But the real reason he's my number 2, other than Be Kind, Rewind, is that for about 20 years before that movie, he was a very, very acclaimed music video director, and he's directed some of the best clips of all time from the White Stripes and Bjork and Lenny Kravitz, and his resume speaks for himself there. So had to give him some love at number 2. Joe?
Pretty good list. I had a tough time because I was actually looking in the wrong places. I was trying to look through French films, and I got kind of depressed because I realized that I didn't see that many. So I just I scrounged by ones that I liked. I think that the only traditional, classic French director that I liked was Jean Cocteau.
Don't know.
Cocteau. Basically, he was best known for doing the 1946 version of Beauty and the Beast.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Which is this really cool movie. I remember seeing it a long time ago, and I just loved how majestic it was. It had this really just classical feel to it that I enjoyed. It was, obviously, it wasn't the 92 Disney version, but I just liked it because it was really, it just really had this air of majesty that reminded me, I think, of the old classical story, the way it was really interpreted. And it was just very different. I liked it. It really stood out to me. Number 4, I'm actually going to kind of cheat a little bit, and it's actually Peirre Jeunet and Marc Caro, because they were the co-directors on City of Lost Children.
That's fine.
And I like Jeunet because I do see the definite style in both Amelie and City of Lost Children. I thought that they were very distinctive. I like the use of colors that you said, Justin. I thought it really created this very beautiful picture. I do like the direction. I think he has a really good way of getting these really intriguing performances out. But I think the thing that really impressed me, in particular with Marc Caro, is that he must have been a really talented director because he got Ron Perlman to deliver these lines when he didn't speak French. That says a lot about both of them, I think, and I'll talk more about that later. My number 3 is somebody watched recently, and I guess it's help me out here, Olivier Nakache. Yeah, he did the Untouchables. I thought there was this great lighthearted drama, and it really stuck with me. I'm really glad you guys showed it me because I didn't think that I would enjoy it that much, but this movie just is really excellent. I could see why it was so highly rated. Yeah,
we talked about that maybe 2 months ago or something on the show, and the Untouchables, great movie.
It was just a really, really good movie, and that's the only thing I've seen of his, but it was really good. And my number 2 is The Prisoner's Guy. Because, how do you pronounce his name again?
I did. Here's how I pronounced it.
I can never do it.
Denis Villeneuve? I don't know.
Dennis
V.
DV. DV. Yeah, I mean, Prisoners I thought was fantastic. I thought Enemy was really good. I just like his style. I like his characterization. I love the pacing of his movies. They really sucked me in. They drove me. And I'm glad you're liking Enemy more the more you think about it. I think it's a pretty good movie. And I didn't actually do an honorable mention, but I guess I will, backtracking a little bit. I really was tempted to put him on, but I guess we decided that Polanski was naturalized French.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because we all sort of did talk about Polanski when we came up with, when Justin mentioned the list. And he was born in France, left there when he was 4 years old, and then in 1976 was a naturalized citizen. But obviously he's an international director. He directs in many different countries and languages, so it's
tough.
Yeah, you're right. We sort of decided.
I know that people might be wondering, technically he's French. Whether that shows up in his films or not, I think is debatable.
Right.
But if you're wondering why he's on the list, I mean, he was definitely, I think, an honorable mention we should at least bring up because he's obviously highly influential and technically French.
Sure. All right, Justin, who's your number 1?
My number 1 is Francois Truffaut. The main reason I chose this director is I think he really emphasizes my belief in middlebrow films. He made this film very early in his career. I completely recommend it to you. I know I give you a hard time about your take in art films, Dan, but this one I think you would like. It's called the 400 Blows, and
I've heard of that.
It's kind of like a mix between the Before series and Richard Linklater's upcoming film Boyhood. He basically took this fictional protagonist and directed a series of films based on based on various points in his life. This one's obviously the most well-known. If you get it from Netflix, it also has a short film that sort of like chronicles his teenage years. Very good movie. Definitely recommend it.
Interesting.
It just has a very good way of capturing the human emotion. And even though he kind of disappointed me when he tried to tackle an American language film with the only adaptation of Fahrenheit 451.
I thought that was fine.
Oh, no. Make no mistake. It's just...
It's not that great.
It's not that great, and it's a tough book to adapt.
Yeah, that's true.
But, I mean, his style still shines through that adaptation.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know he did that. I like that movie.
All right, well, I'll have to check that out. Sounds very interesting, Justin. The 400 Blows. Well, my number one actually is Georges Méliès.
Very cool.
We obviously, like Justin mentioned, he's sort of the subject of the movie Hugo. But it's very interesting. About a year and a half before that movie came out, I was sort of really getting into the history of film, and I had rented this movie called The Magic of Méliès, and it was like a long 2.5, 3 hour documentary about the man and his films. But as a bonus, when they showed a clip from the movie, you could click on the enter button on the DVD player, and it would show you the movie. And like Justin said, they're all very short, 3, 5, 7 minutes. And so through that, I ended up seeing, at least a dozen of his movies, and just the painstaking brilliance of colorizing each frame, split shots, and the cuts, and just everything that he brought to the table that no one else had ever done before. I just have to give the man props, so that is why he's my number one. Joe?
Who do you guys think my number one is?
Luc Besson.
Luc Besson. I mean,
that makes sense.
I mean, no, I really, really love this guy's movies. I mean, Professional's probably one of the best action movies I've ever seen. The Fifth Element is awesome. Great sci-fi movie. I love this guy's style. He has a lot of fun. He's really kind of over the top and very colorful, but he tells good stories and he gets good performances, and I've enjoyed all the movies of his that I've seen. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors. So
I didn't realize he did The Fifth Element.
Yep,
that's awesome.
Then apparently,
and of course he produces a lot of great things. He's like the Liam Neeson producer.
Correct.
So
he
that's
also
always good.
Does some bad things,
Well,
The Family, which I kind of liked.
The Family wasn't great.
I thought it was alright.
It was average, I would say at best. But all right, well, good list, and we'll hear more about at least one of those directors, Jean-Peirre Jeunet, as we do our old classic City of Lost Children and our Oscar A to Z movie Amelie. But first, in our triple feature, which we're going to get to right now, is the new classic, and that's a film that has been released over the last couple of years. And this week, that is Ruby Sparks. Justin's going to tell us about that.
Calvin Ware Fields, played by Paul Dano, is a promising young novelist who has been struggling recently with writer's block, until he finds inspiration in a new character named Ruby, played by Zoe Kazan. However, when Ruby shows up in his house one day, Calvin soon finds himself in the strangest relationship he's ever been in, and more power to manipulate Ruby's behaviors through his typewriter than he should ever have. Writer's block has been a formidable opponent in the creative process, but I have to give props to Ruby Sparks for finding a unique way of telling its story of combating this adversary through a clever spin on the Pygmalion myth. This gets complemented by the fantastic method acting of Zoe Kazan, who also wrote the film, literally able to change the perspective of her character at a moment's notice to fit with the tone of the movie. As such, her chemistry with Dano, playing the all-powerful, and occasionally jealous, author-boyfriend, is at times sweet, at others bizarre, and by the conclusion, even a little intense. At a glance, it's guilty of a handful of indie cliches, but thanks to the leads and a consistently interesting narrative, most of these can be overlooked. Overall, Ruby Sparks is a fun, sometimes wild look into a character truly springing from the mind of a writer, and everyone coming along for the ride, and I give it an A-.
I'd say it's probably the most bizarre relationship anyone's ever been in. not just him.
Fair enough.
Joe, what did you think of Ruby Sparks?
I love the concept of this film. It had a truly great story that isn't afraid to steer away from its own honesty, even the honesty that is sometimes uncomfortable. This all held together by a very well-developed main character and is solidified by a wonderful lead performance from Paul Dano, which, we can all expect by this point. It seems to be a major inspiration, for such films as her, and draws inspiration from other films such as Stranger Than Fiction. So it's kind of an interesting series of introspective looks into the whole concept of writing and the power it literally has, kind of taking a more fantastical direction. The film does seem to lag a bit at the beginning, but if you pay attention, it can be an illuminating experience. It's still a bit quirky and a bit self-indulgent for some viewers, I think, but overall it's definitely worth a watch, and I give it a B+.
Yeah, it definitely does borrow some of its main themes from, amongst others, Stranger Than Fiction, but Ruby Sparks is so original in its execution, its look, and the performances. It's bolstered by a strong script and great performances, specifically Kazan and, of course, Dano. Always good. The ending, I think, is handled kind of awkwardly and is a bit uncomfortable, but Ruby Sparks is overall a truly refreshing and enjoyable romance film, and I give it an A-.
It's the lemonade of, indie movies.
It is, actually. It's quite refreshing. Yeah, I would say romance film is probably a more apt description of it. Because I know, after we were done watching it, we sort of talked about how it's labeled as a comedy, and Joe didn't care for that.
Didn't see much comedy there.
Romance, it's not really a drama, but it kind of is,
romantic
I guess.
Drama, fantasy.
Yeah, I would say it's, if anything,
romantic
fantasy, I think is a good description for it.
Don't get me wrong, there's funny-ish moments, but I don't think it's supposed to make you laugh.
And I think Her would fall into that same category.
Exactly.
Her isn't really that funny. I mean, a little bit here and there, but it's more of a romance and more of a fantasy than anything else.
Romantic sci-fi.
And romantic sci-fi. And I think this certainly fits into that same description.
It's actually definitely a unique kind of genre you don't see done too much. I mean,
and that makes it very... it sets it apart from other indie romances.
Yeah,
for sure.
It definitely has something unique going for it.
Yeah. Justin, you mentioned that it tackles some of the indie cliches.
The clubs and
honestly, I don't know. I mean, are there any indie movies that don't
have at least
deal
one
in
or two
cliches,
That's why that makes them indie, right?
Yeah. So I think for something like this that's so original, I think you can forgive it for the occasional
hiccup.
Oh yeah,
hiccup. Yeah. So good. I'm glad we all liked it. Joe, you had never seen that one before.
No.
So had you heard of it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because it wasn't very widely. I think we only had it at our theater for a week.
Yeah.
And Justin and I happened to get in there while it was playing, but yeah, I could definitely see that one kind of flying under the radar for people.
Completely never heard of it.
So yeah, something to check out if you're into some indie romance movies. All right, well, let's move in now to our old classic, and this is our listener's choice for the month, and we had a few this month from you guys, so we certainly appreciate that. This one comes to us from Uakari, and just happened to be the same week that we have an Oscar movie from this exact same director, which is why we did our top 5 for the French directors. So this was City of Lost Children, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
City of Lost Children is a 1995 science fantasy drama directed by Marc Caro and Peirre Jeunet and starring Ron Perlman. In a dreary future city, a demented mad scientist named Kronk has his cyborg minions sent out into the night to steal children's dreams, as he's incapable of having any of his own. One of these boys is adopted brother of a Russian strongman named One, played by Ron Perlman. With the help of a thieves' guild made up mostly of children, One goes in search of his brother and to uncover the mystery of Kronk's plan. This film is rife with intricate set design and heavily stylized camera work and editing. The atmosphere is bleak, but has a strange charm much of the time. This is aided by heavy amounts of imagery which create many thought-provoking themes. Perlman also has giving one of the best performances I've seen from him. Considering the fact that he's someone who actually doesn't speak French and manages to deliver that dialogue, that's pretty impressive, both as an actor and from the direction. This movie probably is not for everyone and probably deserves multiple rewatches. The characters are interesting, the story is intriguing, and the style is very unique. With the exception of perhaps being a bit overly long, it was a very well-made film, and I give it a B+.
Okay. Well, we've talked about this on the show before, and Justin actually just mentioned it, but I'm always the harshest on the artsy stuff on this show, but I have to say this is my kind of artsy movie. It's quirky, it's colorful, it's got a bizarre story that maybe doesn't always hit the mark, but at least it makes sense for the most part and is consistent, unlike some of the other films we've seen. The look of the film is much like something that Tim Burton might do if he had a little more creativity, or maybe you'd see in a more warped version of Pee-wee's Playhouse. Jeunet invents an interesting world, and it's matched with a completely unique story and stunning visuals and some good acting, not just from Ron Perlman, but from some of the side characters as well. The look sometimes is near overkill at some points, especially with the fisheye directing style that...
No, you didn't like the wide-angle lenses?
I liked it when
the
it
robot?
was... Yeah, I liked it in certain instances, but I think it's overused here. And like you mentioned, Joe, the bizarre and creepy story is certainly not going to be for everybody.
No, it's definitely a little off at some points.
Yeah, but honestly, the technological achievements alone here, including some really interesting CGI, early CGI really, are enough to move past a lot of that. And actually, I also give City of Lost Children a B+.
Oh, wow.
Justin?
After seeing 3 films from director Jean-Peirre Jeunet's filmography, one we're going to review later, Amelie, and the other one that we won't be reviewing, Delicatessen, I find myself admiring Jeunet's ability to take inspiration from other directors like him, such as the dark fantasy work from Terry Gilliam, and find a way to make it his own. But I kind of struggle with the fact that the worlds he creates, more often than not, feel slightly underdeveloped. Granted, out of the 3 films I've seen, I thought this one handled it the best, but it takes a long time before anything really gets divulged to the viewer. It's kind of a pity because the characters, much like in Jeunet's other films as well, are really interesting. And instead, much of the time, the motives of several characters isn't much more than, hey, we're the good guys, or hey, we're the villains.
At least the initial surface viewing.
Yeah. I mean, that could get better amongst rewatches. This is probably the one I would have the most desire to watch again.
No, I'd say you could probably draw those conclusions, but I think more was divulged later on. But it's...
And you had already seen this, right, Justin?
No, this is...
Oh, Joe was the only one that had seen this. Okay.
Yeah, this was first screening.
Gotcha.
Okay, all right.
So take that how you will, ladies and gentlemen.
And before to cut you off completely, I didn't like it as much the first time, if it makes you feel any better.
Yeah, remember you were...
I wasn't that excited.
You were a little concerned.
I was into it.
I know.
Surprisingly.
I was surprised that you liked it. I was watching it, actually.
That said, the cinematography and the lighting provides a wonderfully creepy dystopian look to the film, and some well-placed twists in the narrative keep the audience curious about what will truly occur next in this twisted futuristic society. At times, it's more than a little unsettling, and I believe you both mentioned it's definitely not going to be for everyone, but The City of Lost Children is a strange, unique sci-fi worth taking a look at, and I give it a B+ as well.
Triple B+.
Gotta like that.
Wow.
I didn't actually think it was that long, Joe. You thought it was a little overlong?
A little bit, maybe. Well, maybe not long, but it was a bit slow at points. Like, it kind of took its time, and there were points where the side characters were kind of meandering. Like, there was one scene
maybe a little bit.
where, like, literally Ron Perlman's character divulges and sort of takes a break from searching for his brother and hangs out in, like, a brothel. And it was
okay.
That's
true.
Like, that scene really didn't go anywhere. Just kind of like, yeah, I'm depressed. I mean, like, okay, I get it, but...
Or we have that whole bit where his dad looks like he's going to die, and then
the dad doesn't
magically
die.
is okay.
And yeah, that whole subplot kind of sort of meanders. Like, it's one of those things where I'll be honest, this is my second time watching it. I still don't completely understand what happened, but I'm interested. Like, I wasn't bored. Like, I was trying to figure it out, and I still want to watch it again. Like, I can come away from this movie really saying it definitely has some rewatch value if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the main story makes sense.
Yes.
But there's a lot of side
things
intricacies that maybe don't all connect. I can agree with that.
And they aren't quite as well explained. Maybe they don't have to be.
Yeah.
I just think that it got kind of etched in a lot of symbolism and stuff towards the end. It became more metaphorical. But some of the main plot point made sense. I did like how that came together. But there's a lot of stuff going on there that I think wasn't quite as heavily obvious as it could have been. But, maybe that's not the point.
Was this the first movie of his that you'd seen?
Oh yeah, a long time ago. I think I watched this one years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think I had seen a bit of Amelie, but I don't think I finished it. And I think I know why. Spoilers.
Until this week, you never finished it.
Oh, I finished it.
Yeah, you did.
It was good.
Uh-oh.
Well, yeah, we have to thank you, Akari, for sending us this one, and already a couple for the next month.
Yep.
And we actually have quite a few going for next month's Listener's Choice.
What are some of those, Dan?
The Edge. is one of them. The Secret of Kells, right?
Yeah, Secret of Kells.
So that's one of them. And Yui Kari himself has given us some other ones. So lots to choose from, but it's still almost a month away. So if you have a listener's choice you'd like us to check out for the show, we'll certainly put it in the mix and draw, whatever we end up watching in a few weeks here. You could do that as a comment on the YouTube video you're watching, or you can do it on our Film Fanatics group on Facebook, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And if you know us personally, you can just tell us. We've had a couple people do that so far too. So lots of ways you can get us your old classic. I really liked this one.
Yeah.
I was probably more surprised than anybody, but right from the start, just the look of it, I was like, okay, this has a more interesting look.
I'll be honest, I'm surprised you liked it. It was a bit I thought it was a bit artsy. It definitely wasn't that straightforward. A lot of metaphors and, pandering, to some extent.
No, that is true, but I wonder if because...
Well, this is my question. Mm-hmm. What sets this one apart from a lot of more artsy, surrealist films?
I think I was just going to...
Because this is a very weird movie.
Get to that. It is very weird, but I wonder if because I was intrigued by the look of it right from the start, that I was really, paying a ton of attention to everything going on. It made me... take a little more notice.
So for you, it was more about having interesting visuals to captivate you at the very least. A lot of
these, from the start, yes. A lot of these films that are of the more artsy variety that we review don't capture me right away. And so I get a little bit bored with them. And I think Under the Skin's a good example of that, which you had sort of explained a couple of things to me that I hadn't really thought about while watching it.
Because I thought, not to get too off topic, I thought the opening to Under the Skin was very interesting visually. But it was confusing.
It was confusing, and that doesn't usually go over that well for me. If the opening scene, I don't know anything that's going on, and I have no interest in finding out, that doesn't bode well.
Okay.
Whereas this one... and I sort of mentioned, it's sort of like a warped Pee-wee's Playhouse, the way everything sort of was set up, and to me, it was attention-grabbing.
Okay.
Does that mean it's a better movie than Under the Skin or some of the other ones? Maybe not. But certainly for me, it was more captivating.
No, that's cool.
But speaking of Jeunet, of course, we're going to get to Amelie now. This was nominated for 5 Oscars, most of which were in the artistic vein, but also Best Foreign Language Film and Best Original Screenplay for Jeunet and Guillaume Laurent. Amelie Polion, played by Audrey Tautou, is a sheltered young Parisian girl who creates a rich fantasy life to help her overcome her loneliness. When her mother dies and her father becomes distant, she leaves home and becomes a waitress, where she meets some interesting characters. The film is largely about Amelie's interactions with the people around her and becoming consumed with doing for others. The film is probably about as artsy as Jeunet's City of Lost Children, but in a much more lighthearted way. It's quirky from the get-go, but its first half is at least interesting and relatable. And then somewhere around the halfway mark, it turns into an almost entirely different movie in tone. Amelie's fantasies become more persistent and turn into these Ally McBeal-inspired cutesy sequences, and it even stops being mainly about Amelie and much more about the people around her. Tautou does a good job in the role, but it's difficult to keep the movie afloat when it seems to be at odds with itself. It is another visual stunner from Jeunet, but I can only give Amelie a borderline positive grade with a B-. Joe, you already sort of started to voice your opinions a little bit on this, so let's go to you next.
Well, when it comes to Amelie, I'm just going to start off by saying I loved the characters. Amelie was very interesting, and the movie was also right for these great side characters. Actually very similar to City of Lost Children, but I actually like the characters even more. I really do.
Well, they're certainly more defined.
They're more defined, and they're more human. They're more relatable, down to earth. It's a little less fantastical. It's magical realism, right, Justin?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Ish. Yeah, very much in that vein. It was magical, and it easily was felt pretty consistently and fluidly for the first half of the film. And I felt that there was a really good story and had strong direction, and some really interesting things were happening, both visually and under the surface. And then, much like Dan said, it kind of becomes this series of vignettes that become more sporadic and heavily metaphorical, and it becomes difficult to distinguish the true plot from what is fluff. Mm-hmm. It probably deserves a rewatch, but it really does lose some serious direction around Act 3. Other than that, it was a very charming and interesting movie, but I just felt like near the last half of it, I really lost a lot of interest. It just lost its focus big time, but still, I give it a B- as well. Thought it would have been almost a B. I felt like it would have been really solid, but just didn't quite get that solidity.
I think if the whole movie was that first half, I can easily see giving it like a B+, A-,
maybe
in that range. And then it just so falls apart.
No, I would honestly say that from the opening scene, it really sucked me in. It had some just really awesome like events in the plot, and it was a really great narrative, great characters, great music, and everything. And I'm not sure what happened, but I agree. I think like it could have been an A-caliber movie, but something really went wrong somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and she always had this sort of fantasy thing going on.
She did.
And then they just got like
it became the whole movie.
It became the whole movie.
But it almost like got separated from her. Like there were whole scenes where she wasn't even in, and I forgot that she was part of the movie. It's called Amelie, and like there were whole scenes where it feels like it was just another subplot of something else.
It's like, we like you, come back.
Exactly. And then I felt like she was kind of a side character in some other people's stories, but some of those scenes just I didn't understand the connection. I don't know.
And how a dancing baby wasn't involved. A la Ally McBeal, I didn't understand because it was look, he was ripping the fantasy right out of the McBeal playbook.
He points that out, and it really did remind me of that weird dream sequence CGI thing that was big in the late 90s.
Huge.
It was this weird little phase, and he's not kidding. It's a very Ally McBeal inspired thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it was there, but those scenes were just. I don't know.
And we timelined it because the movie came out in 2001. Ally McBeal went off the air around that
2001.
Time.
So yeah,
it sort of makes sense.
I guess.
Justin, let's hear from you about Amelie. Now, you had seen this one before?
No.
Okay.
This was new territory for me.
A lot of new territory today.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
If there's one aspect that keeps me interested in Jeunet work, it's that he always offers his audience an interesting and generally likable protagonist to follow. And in Amelie, that aspect is front and center. In merely the opening prologue, the audience is introduced to Amelie's tragic, yet at times darkly comedic past, and Tatou's ability to play her as both an introvert and a genuine lover of people as a whole is impressive. The only real setback, as both my colleagues have mentioned, comes from around the halfway point, where the film seems to focus less on Amelie herself, and rather tell each of the side character stories in kind of small vignettes, trying to hit home that all of these events ultimately serve a purpose in how everything plays out. It never really drags, but rather makes the whole story a little confusing later on, until coming full circle for a sweet and satisfying conclusion. Amelie is a film with just enough bizarre quirkiness to draw one in, and had the film focused more on Amelie herself, as we've mentioned before, would have easily earned a higher grade. But for now, it gets a B.
You know, I did like the theme he was going for with the causality and everything being connected, kind of a Magnolia type thing.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
I really liked that. I love those sort of stories, like with Crash and 13 Conversations About One Thing, where it's like a series of different characters. Oh, by the way, classic McConaughey. Before the bad stuff.
13 Conversations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, lawyer, of course.
Well, but his best characters are.
It was good. I love movies like that where it's just like a series of different stories and they're all loosely connected and there's like a general theme. Mm-hmm. I love stuff like that. But I don't think that's what this movie was. I mean, like, I got the idea and I understand it being part of the subplots maybe, but this was about this one character. And I think if there had been more focus, more confidence around the character that was easily the strongest part of the movie, it would have been a lot better.
And she's a great character.
She really is.
She's well written, well acted, and she's a nice person. I mean, she's trying to live her life doing things for other people, which is great.
You can get behind it.
You can get behind it, but then when the focus becomes those other people,
I mean,
and she falls away to the
they were interesting
sidelines,
right?
I was going to say that's
most of them. Yeah,
that was kind of the frustrating aspect of it. Is none of the side characters are bad. I just don't think they need to be the central focus for the second half of the movie.
And the thing is, the vignettes they're focused on, most of them aren't even developed that well. Like some of the people in the diner, they're interesting, but that's all we get of them.
Right.
And if we had just had some bit where like we keep focusing on Amelie with them, would have been so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have had enough to do, and there would have been great chemistry, and it would have really been a better movie.
I don't know. I guess they were afraid they might jive it with the script, perhaps. It wouldn't have worked necessarily. It just felt like there were lumped in pieces of other scripts that were kind of shoved into this movie for some extra quirkiness, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Here's another one that I could see, though, doing well as a TV show, because it would allow this character to sort of flow in and out of these people's lives, and almost like a My Name is Earl vibe,
Kinda,
helping people as she goes along.
Yeah.
But right, we'd get to learn a little more about the restaurant characters and, the other people in her life, her father.
That could be good as a TV show.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
But people swear by this movie. I mean, the fans of Amelie love it. So there's obviously something there.
There's something good there.
I wish it was more consistent all the way through.
Yeah.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was the show of agreement.
It really is. But that's what happens when Jersey Boys comes out and is not as good as it should be.
Yeah, we'll blame it on
Well
Jersey.
played.
I can't,
I'm just telling you, I wanted more Mafia.
I know. More Mafia would have been good.
Like the scene in the car, that was intense, and then it was just a joke. Spoilers.
Yeah, that was actually one of my least favorite scenes of the movie because of that. Because of the payoff.
Like, that was like, oh man, that's so intense. They're gonna, frame him.
Yeah.
Oh, how did...
Just kidding. No, really. The character basically says, just kidding. It's like, what?
I don't know, that was lame.
Speaking of which,
tell me.
quite possibly the tamest R-rated movie since The King's Speech.
No, when I found out it was R, I was like...
Strictly for language, of course.
It literally seemed like PG through the whole thing, then they just started dropping the F-bomb a couple times. You could have just had a bigger audience if you, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a shame. Well, anyway, the music was good.
Yeah, man.
No.
Cherry.
Listen, love the Four Seasons, okay?
Hey.
Nothing wrong with
no
that.
problem with Frankie Valli.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for this week's show. You can subscribe to us on the Facebook channel if you've not done so thus far. And, of course, you can get us your picks for Old Classic as well. We'll be doing another Old Classic Listener's Choice for July. Joe, you've got the Merlin the Mighty page going on.
Yeah.
What's new on your channel?
I'm probably going to upload some stuff from the Philly Con, and I'll be getting some more videos up soon.
Cool. Did you guys take some video at Comic-Con?
I took some pictures and some video.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. Took clips of some interviews, so you'll get to see some segments. Some of it might be shaky because I was carrying a lot of stuff, and so I was trying to hold the camera up, but my arms were literally hurting. So
nice.
I was it was a struggle, but I wanted to get something.
And maybe a full review for Transformers coming next week.
A full, yeah. There might actually. It's funny. There's a couple
hate reviewing.
It's funny because the thing is that there's a couple movies that the guys will get together and say we've got to review these things, make it as a big group, and most of them are good ones, but a couple bad ones we're obligated to. And I said on the train back, remember guys, next week, Transformers. And we don't have to watch Transformers. I'm like, no, it's gonna happen.
Yes, you do.
Have to do Transformers,
and we'll all be watching it too. We're gonna lead that off next week's show.
Unfortunately,
so we'll let you know what we think of Transformers. We've also got the Film Fanatics Facebook group. You can check out our 5-word reviews there weekly, usually about a day or two before that week's show goes up. That's Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And you can follow us on Twitter as well, and that's at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Hail Hydra!